everyone. Welcome to this Pro Football Weekly Facebook Live. 15 days until the NFL draft, so we are here to give you the goods on what to look forward to at the draft, the news, scoops and rumors that we're hearing around the league, and what you shouldn't be listening to at this point in the NFL juncture. Joined, of course, by Hub Arkish and Arthur Arkish. I am Kevin Fishbane, and let's start with the news that came out last night. Adam Schefter reported the Browns might not take Myles Garrett #1, that they're considering Mitchell Trubisky, not to be confused with Mitch Trubisky. And Hub, we see this stuff happen all the time. It seems like everyone assumed Myles Garrett's a surefire #1 pick. You would think the Browns can get Trubisky at 12 or move that 12th pick up into the top 10 if they wanted to get both of them. What do you make of a report like that comes out?
Well, you can make a lot out of it. First of all, hi, guys. I'm constantly amazed that this technology works at all, so it's really good to be with all of our friends who might be viewing. You can all see I've got the best-looking office. Unfortunately, I'm the least prepared, so we're going to do the best we can to share some insight and information with you. And, you know, guys, I've assumed all along the Browns are going to screw this up, so there's really nothing surprising about it to me. I think that Adam Schefter is the best at what he does. Now, granted, he works for a competitor, but actually got his start at Pro Football Weekly. And Adam is solid. I'm sure he's getting this good intel from somebody in that organization. It would be inexcusable if they used the #1 overall pick on anybody but Myles Garrett. And you know, guys, this happens. Arthur, I'll come to you next for your thoughts. This happens once every 10, 15 years, where there is an absolute no-brainer, no-doubter, clear consensus on the #1 pick. You look at our grades, we've got Myles Garrett at 7.5. The next best grade is a 7.1. Most of the people I respect and talk to have a bigger spread between Garrett and #2 than that. And particularly to be sitting there with the 12th pick to boot, nobody but the Browns could screw this up. And so I'm not terribly shocked to hear Adam reporting this. Now, what I would say is that before I indict the Browns too completely, this could be done intentionally to try and create more interest in trading that first pick. We know the Browns love to do it, and they do know that they can get Mitch or Mitchell Trubisky, whichever you prefer, at #12. So we shouldn't rule out that possibility. It's a two-parter, Arthur. One is if anybody can screw it up, the Browns can. Two, before we indict them, maybe they're trying to be smart and see how much they can drive up the value of that #1 overall pick.
Yeah, Hub, if anything ever screamed smoke screen to me, this would be it. You guys both hit on it. Not only do the Browns have the 12th overall pick, but they've got, 5 in the first 67 this year and kind of a similar bounty next year, or a similar sort of, wealth that they're tapping into. And the reason they've been doing this, spending the past year plus under this new analytics department, collecting draft picks the way they have, is for this exact situation, not these two players specifically, but a scenario wherein they have two players, two top 10, two top 12 guys that they absolutely feel that they cannot miss on, and they're in position to do so. So maybe teams will at least be picking up the phone who are looking for, as Hub said, what looks like a generational pass rusher in Myles Garrett, and seeing just how much they may be willing to spend. But at the end of the day, 15 days from now, I'd be stunned if the name on that card at #1 overall is anyone but Myles Garrett.
Well, let's talk about Trubisky for a second, because he was also in the news this week because the Bills sent a pretty full contingent to see him. It wasn't just the coach and personnel guys. The owner went down to see Mitchell Trubisky. So the Bills pick at 10. They have Tyrod Taylor at least for 2017. Another potential smokescreen situation, but I think it reminds us that Trubisky is kind of someone to keep an eye on in this top 10, that he maybe be that quarterback, Hub, that even though we don't have him as our top quarterback, but maybe he's the guy that teams see as with the highest ceiling as a franchise, and he could turn this thing if he ends up going that high.
You know, Kevin, it's a fascinating point, and again, just a thought, guys. I think I'm more embarrassed for being the guy who forgot to turn the volume off on his cell phone than being the dolt who doesn't even have his own cool ringtone. So I apologize for that. That's the classic one that comes with the phone. I don't know how to change it. What's interesting, Kevin, is that the people I talk to tell me that DeShone Kizer and not Mitchell Trubisky is the one who's climbing up draft boards right now. And so, to Arthur's point, that's why I really do think this better be a smokescreen. Mitch Trubisky may turn out to be a Hall of Fame quarterback in the NFL. You do not use the number 1 overall pick. You don't use a top 10 pick on a guy with 13 game tapes, particularly when he lost 3 of those last 4 games. You cannot do it. You know, I mean, this is a guy who he's a great prospect. He's got some interesting measurables, some interesting numbers. He's got about 8 or 9 really good tapes in those 13 tapes. But he should be automatically disqualified from the top 10, Arthur, on nothing more than just the fact that you don't know enough about him.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Hub, but I do think that there's a strong chance we're still going to see him end up going in the top 10 just because of, A, the QB shortage around the league, obviously, B, the way these guys at the top are all muddled. I mean, we've been saying for 2 months that Myles Garrett was the fait accompli at number 1, but then everyone has had a hard time sort of hammering down the second pick in 2 through 5 because it doesn't seem like there's a huge gap. And that's not only at other positions like corner and safety and defensive tackle, edge rusher, but also at quarterback. So I don't disagree with you, but I do think that, there's never been more desperate times in the NFL to go and get your franchise quarterback. So 13 starts, 33 starts, if guys see multiple traits and enough traits that convince them that they have a future franchise guy, whatever that even means, it still wouldn't stun me. And I do think the Bills are interested too. I don't think that's a smokescreen. Our Greg Gabriel, who is in pretty tight with Buffalo, said that, and this is a little ironic to me because it happened one day after the whole LaShawn McCoy, Kiko Alonso social media spat, but Greg said that Buffalo did not intend on that picture of McDermott and Pagula at the North Carolina workout with Trubisky and the North Carolina head coach. They didn't intend on that being made public, and they also have interviewed have worked out with Deshaun Kaiser over the past week too, reportedly. So it does sound like this is where there's smoke, there's fire, and the Bills aren't sold on Tyrod Taylor as the long-term answer.
Yeah, and Kevin, if I could just jump in real quick, Arthur's absolutely correct when he says overdrafted. I mean, all of these quarterback prospects, at least the first 5 or 6, are going to get overdrafted because that's what happens at this position. So I don't mean to suggest that Trubisky's not going to get picked in there. He is. I can't fathom him going number 1 overall. I can't fathom him being a top 5 pick because he probably belongs somewhere between 20 and 40. He'll most likely go somewhere between 10 and 20 because that's what happens at this position. And it's going to happen to all of these guys with the possible exception of Kaiser because as a prospect, he should be the first quarterback off the board. But because of the questions about his production and performance and some issues about what kind of guy he is, he's the one that probably won't get overdrafted. And what's fascinating is when you talk to NFL people, he's got the best tools.
And so we know Kaiser, Watson, Trubisky, and then Mahomes are top 4 quarterbacks. We all expect those guys to be the first 4 to go, whether they're all in the first round, a couple in the first, couple in the second, and then you get to the Davis Webbs and Brad Kayas and Nate Petermans of the world. But one of our questions on Facebook is interesting. We know those are the top quarterbacks, but who's going to be the first team? And I think the Browns factor in this conversation as being the first team to take a quarterback because of the draft ammo they have, because of their situation at quarterback. Arthur, we just talked about the Bills at number 10, the Jets at 6, and then, of course, the 49ers at 2 and the Bears at 3. I think those are 2 teams that would probably love to be able to trade back. But also these are teams that have stopgaps, that have veterans that could at least play quarterback for 2017. So maybe that lessens the need. You look at the Texans, they need a quarterback there in the 20s. How about any of those teams you think would be the first team to take a quarterback?
Yeah, I guess the thing that I would take exception to, Kevin, is when we say that the 49ers and the Bears have stopgaps, the Bears have a guy in Mike Glennon who they're hoping is their quarterback of the future. I'm not saying he is, but I know that's what they hope. They see him as potentially a lot more than a stopgap, and it's not unrealistic. He's a former number 3 pick who has shown some nice traits and has some great tangibles. The 49ers, on the other hand, they've got backups. They don't have a stopgap in terms of a legitimate starter, a guy you can win with. Now, obviously, with their 6-year contracts, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are not that worried about winning this year. But the flip side of it is that nobody loves a quarterback more than Kyle Shanahan. And the fact that everybody and their brother, both in the Frisco organization and other organizations around the league, is telling me that they're taking Solomon Thomas, that's what tells me that the 49ers are the team that's going to take the quarterback. I think at number 2, that particularly when you look at match and style, I'm not so sure that Deshaun Watson isn't going to be too much for Kyle Shanahan to pass. unless they really shock us and think that Kaiser could be sitting there at 34. And maybe he could. I don't know. But Arthur, if I had to make a bet right now, I still think the 49ers could take Watson off the board at number 2. I would think that would be an incredible reach, but not as much of a reach as Trubisky.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the organization that's kind of starting fresh and handed out the 6-year contract extensions, obviously, and has the quarterback guru, as Hub mentioned, and Kyle Shanahan. So in my last mock draft, I believe I did mock Deshaun Watson to the 49ers, but Mitchell Trubisky wouldn't stun me there at that spot either. I think both Deshaun Kaiser and Patrick Mahomes would be a little surprising just from what we've been able to glean about how they're I know there are contrasting opinions on all of these guys, but I think you could probably get away with easier pulling the trigger on a Watson or a Trubisky before Kaiser or a Mahomes at number 2. But I've got my eyes on the Jets. I look at I get back to that word desperate, and I look at Mike Maccagnan and I see Todd Bowles, and they've screwed this position up already a couple times. And yes, they do have Josh McCown. But they're kind of trying to move past the whole punchline at the quarterback position, whether it was Geno Smith or Christian Hackenberg at 51st overall last year. So that's a team I would keep an eye on at number 6 is the Jets being the first to get the quarterback off the board.
Yeah, we got a few questions on our Facebook Live, so feel free to comment those. I'm going to get to those in a second. One more quarterback question I want to throw at both of you. Arthur, come to you first. The Houston Texans. Will Tom Savage be their quarterback week 1, and then what do they do in terms, because they're kind of in a sweet spot in terms of one of these guys could be there for their pick in the first round, but they might be considered one of the teams most desperate for a quarterback unless you believe in Tom Savage.
I don't know that anyone's seen enough to make an opinion on Tom Savage one way or the other. The problem is that both times he's had an opportunity to play, he's immediately flashed and then immediately gotten hurt. So obviously the Texans need first and foremost someone that's going to be available, and I don't think they should be convinced that Savage is going to be that guy. Now, that being said, it's pretty clear that the Texans had all their eggs in the Tony Romo basket, whether it was a 2017 second rounder that went to Cleveland and it wasn't. It was a 2018 second rounder. But I think it's pretty clear that was the most logical landing spot for Romo. And at least for now, I know we'll get more into Romo here shortly. At least for now, that looks like it won't be the case. So, yeah, I think it's going to be Tom Savage. Bill O'Brien said he's not real, smitten on the idea of playing a rookie quarterback, and Savage is the guy. I don't think it's Brandon Weeden. We could probably all agree on that. Those are the only two they have on the roster right now. So I'd expect them to get one high, probably in the first round, whether it means trading back in or using that 25th, 26th pick. I can't recall which one it is now, but yeah, I think Tom Savage is going to be the week 1 guy, and I think the Tony Romo watch is going to go on all season because unless Savage impresses everyone and turns out to exceed expectations for Houston.
That's good because I missed the Brett Favre watch, so it's nice to bring that back. What do you think about Houston's quarterback situation?
Guys, I'm not hearing anybody else say it, and I'm not hearing this from any of our sources around the league. But I would, and I don't bet, you guys know this, but if I had to bet a lunch or something I could afford, I'd say Jay Cutler is going to be the starting quarterback of the Houston Texans on opening day. And if not, I think he may be starting in Denver. Now, again, we're reaching a little bit here, but this will keep until after the draft. I think that if the Texans do that, they still take the quarterback they like the best at 25 if they're sitting there, because you're not betting on suddenly you're going to make Cutler something he wasn't. But the Denver Broncos and the Houston Texans have something in common, and they're the only two teams out there that have this in common. They are a veteran starting quarterback away from being a legitimate Super Bowl contender. When you look at those defenses and you look at those receivers in Denver and you look at the running game and some of the receivers in Houston, obviously the Texans liked Tom Savage when they took him in the 4th round, but that was about where he fit in the 4th round. And Arthur's right. They don't want to play a rookie quarterback. Well, for all practical purposes, Tom Savage is a rookie quarterback. When we talk about his on-field experience, and the little bit we've seen has not been overwhelming. As a matter of fact, it's been pretty underwhelming, particularly if you go back to the playoffs. So I just think that they're all letting this percolate. The other guy we can talk about is Colin Kaepernick, but Kaepernick brings some things that Cutler doesn't. If you bring Kaepernick in, you got to be ready for a potential quarterback controversy if he plays well for a couple of years. With Cutler, it's cut and dried. If he comes in and Bill O'Brien, the quarterback whisperer, if he can get Cutler to protect the football, which with a good enough ground game with Lamar Miller and that defense, you can do that. He makes perfect sense. Now, again, I'm not got any sources, telling me this, but we've been doing this for a long time, and it's just too logical to ignore as we see this continue to develop.
Well, it's also tough to ignore, Hub, that based on Kristen Cavallari's Instagram, Jay Cutler is perfectly enjoying his time not playing football. So, maybe.
Yeah, when you've already put about $100 million in the bank and your wife's a movie star, you can do that. So it's. I guess
I would love to
think she is.
I would love to see Bill O'Brien and Jay Cutler. That would be an interesting duo in terms of kind of hot-headed guys. But he is the best quarterback still available, followed, of course, by Colin Kaepernick. Let's get to a couple of these questions. Josh checking in about the safety spot and the idea of taking a safety in the top 5. And we're all based out of Chicago. We all know the Bears need a safety. Jamal Adams is, by many ranked top safety. Malik Hooker, some people have him number 1 if it wasn't for the surgeries. The idea of taking a safety in the top 5 is kind of unheard of. Eric Berry, the last one to go in the top 5. But the idea of one going 3, even if it's a generational player who some scouts say these two guys could be, Arthur, I'm coming to you first. What do you think about the idea of a safety, one of these guys going in the top 5, maybe as high as 3 to the Bears?
Yeah, I think we have to throw out the past kind of notion or the old line of thinking that it was too high. Because the game is changing, and it's part of the cliche, but it's now more than ever a matchup league. And it's interesting to me, just overall, that 1 year after the tight ends and the safeties in the draft stunk so much, now you're talking about potentially special classes. So I think that teams need to kind of adjust accordingly. And it is tricky because Malik Hooker's medical, and I don't know that we'll know more on it, but I know he's heading back to Indy this week for a recheck, and maybe that'll help kind of teams' plans crystallize a little bit after they have a better idea with him coming off multiple surgeries. But I think Jamal Adams running that unbelievable 40 at his pro day, and yes, I know everyone's pro day times are amped up a little bit, but I still think that probably quelled any remaining concerns about him. So although I don't want to speak for our guy, Greg Gabriel, who has Malik Hooker ahead of Jamal Adams and thinks Hooker has a special quality to him that Adams doesn't. So I'll throw that out there as well. But just back to your initial question, Kevin, I think, as you mentioned, Eric Berry is the highest to go. 6th overall, I believe it was a handful of years ago. But the game is changing, and you need these guys, bigger receivers, more prolific receiving tight ends, just more offenses operating in space, and there's never been a greater need for tight ends. So if you're sold on one of these guys as the 3rd or 4th or 5th best player in the draft, then yeah, I think you go ahead and pull the trigger.
Then, Hub, you have other teams in the top 10, like the Chargers and Titans, who certainly are in that category of needing a safety, which is why if you're Ryan Pace and the Bears, you might not want to take any chances if you fall in love with one of these guys. And Malik Hooker, probably the better ball hawk of the two. But as Arthur mentioned, the medical, what do you think about the idea of a safety going that high?
Guys, there are a couple things here. I don't care what the position is. If a player is special, if he's unique, you can take him with a top 5 pick. And Eric Berry was and is proven to be. And so if it's a pick or 2 higher, what's the difference? The question is, what about these 3 prospects we're talking about? Now, I think most of the folks looking in understand when we call Greg Gabriel our guy. Let's establish his creds. It's a guy with 32 years of NFL scouting experience who was the director of college scouting for the Bears for a decade. So we're talking about a real scout. And Greg's comment on Jamal Adams is the one that has impressed me the most of all the people I talked to. Going to be a very good football player. He doesn't have any special about him. Malik Hooker has some real special about him. And I'm talking to a number of scouts and teams who didn't go to the University of Michigan like I do, who believe that Jabril Peppers has some special about him. So on our board, on my personal board, Adams is number 3. I think he's going to be a really good football player, but there's no way I could see him in the top 5. If you could get a clean medical on Malik Hooker, you could absolutely see him in the top 5. The problem is that even though he's being rechecked now, he's just not far enough away from that hip labrum surgery to know for sure. And as far as Peppers, I think the kid's going to be a great football player, but there's enough varying opinions about him that it's hard to see him going in the top 5. It's probably hard to see him going in the top 10. Don't be shocked if he comes off the board before Adams, though, because I'm telling you, there's some teams who get it with that kid. And again, Jamal Adams is a really good prospect, probably going to be a 10, 12-year starter in the league, might go to a Pro Bowl or two. But when you look at Malik Hooker, this is the kid that might be Eric Berry or Earl Thomas, again, assuming he gets 100% rehab on that hip. I look at the tape on these kids. I talk to people. I could see Hooker going somewhere between 4 and 7, 4 and 8. I can see Peppers and Adams going somewhere between 8 and 16.
Hey, Kevin, you wrote the safety feature in our magazine. I just want to get your take on this. You talked to Greg Schiano, Hooker's defensive coordinator, Ohio State. What are your thoughts? How special are these kids, and is it kind of in line with the top 5 pick?
Yeah, I mean, Greg Schiano, he certainly comes up biased because he coached Hooker, but he called him a rare talent. And Schiano is interesting because he coached in the NFL, so he knows the NFL system well. And he said, look, if you can get an Ed Reed type guy, as Hub said, if you can get a generational talent, you take them that high. And he thinks Malik Hooker has those rare instincts. The other thing about Hooker, only 1 year as a starter. So he's got a lot of room to grow in the position. The thing about Jamal Adams that is interesting as people talk about his intangibles, maybe more than any of the other defensive players, period. I mean, I'm including Jonathan Allen, Solomon Thomas, Marshawn Lattimore. I've heard more about Jamal Adams' leadership qualities more than anybody else. And safety, teams consider the quarterback of the defense. So it'll be interesting to see how teams weigh that when they evaluate him. Let's go to another question. This one's from Ron about Christian McCaffrey, who I think could be one of the more interesting guys in the first round because he's and Ron asked specifically about McCaffrey to the Eagles, and that's been kind of a hot topic in terms of an Eagles team that needs a running back, could be a nice fit in that offense. And of course, a lot of people talk about McCaffrey and the Patriots. Seems like a perfect fit if they got that first round pick back. But Arthur, I'll come to you first on McCaffrey and then some of the Eagles draft needs because clearly they need a corner. But McCaffrey's somebody that could go anywhere in this first round, and that could lead into a conversation about a very deep running back class too.
Yeah, in my last mock draft available on ProFootballWeekly.com, I had McCaffrey to the Eagles. I know that was not a out of left field pick. That's what you're seeing in a lot of mock drafts, but I just think it makes too much sense. They not only have a needed running back, but Doug Peterson kind of looking for his new Jamal Charles, and he has Darren Sproles still, who will be 34 years old, and that's kind of the McCaffrey's bigger and he's built. He's not going to be a between the tackles 20 carry a game guy, but he's not exactly Darren Sproles either. A little bigger, a little stronger of a runner. But I just think that's such a natural kind of passing of the torch because anyone who's pigeonholing Christian McCaffrey as a running back is making a big mistake. If he's used in the right offense, he's going to be catching a ton of passes. He's going to be returning a lot of kicks, and there's no question he has additional value there. So I love him. I think he'd make great sense to the Eagles at 14. I wouldn't rule out completely the Panthers at 8, though, who are also looking for their next franchise back. And then I know it's maybe even lazy with all the Broncos ties, but I don't think he's getting past 20. And you look at the McCaffrey history there, and you look at Denver's need for kind of a versatile game breaker like that. So those are the 3 teams I kind of would have my eye on anyway.
How McCaffrey or a cornerback if you're Howie Roseman in the Philadelphia Eagles at 14?
Well, real quick follow-up first, Kevin, on your comments on Jamal Adams, which I think are spot on. But I just want to add to it, not only does everybody talk about his leadership skills, but they talk about his football intelligence. They talk about his dependability. He's been healthy, his toughness. Those are all wonderful things. They're all things you don't use a top 5 pick on. You can draft those things in the middle, late first round, even in the later rounds. When we talk about these top 5, top 8 kids, they've got to be rare physical specimens. That this gets back to that comment about some special about them. And so, that's the only issue I see there separating them. As far as Christian McCaffrey, we're assuming that both Leonard Fournette and Dalvin Cook go higher than 14 for the Eagles to take him there, because I like McCaffrey, but there's no way I'm taking him ahead of one of the other 2. And I don't see the other 2 both being gone. I think Fournette will go, but I think Dalvin Cook will be there on the board. So, as much as McCaffrey may have more versatility, he may do more things, Dalvin Cook, I think, is special. And so the reason I would doubt the Eagles taking McCaffrey is if they're going to go running back, I think they would take Cook. Now, do they take a cornerback or a running back? At this point, guys, Ryan Matthews just doesn't stand a football field. You like to see him when he's on the field. He's not a Pro Bowler, but he certainly can be productive. He can give you some big games. it is a serious need for the Philadelphia Eagles. Cornerback is a monstrous need for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, they have upgraded the weapons around Carson Wentz by adding Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith. And so, what have they done to upgrade the secondary or the defense? Not as much, or nothing that I'm going to hang my hat on. So, and then you look at the talent, they could get probably the third or fourth best cornerback in a draft that has as many as 12 that are worthy of top, 50 or top 64 picks. Now, but then I'm arguing against myself, because if you can get a really good corner in the second round, then maybe you do address the running back position. The other thing, guys, is don't overlook the Foreman kid from Texas. It depends on what chart you look at. McCaffrey is going to be a really good player, but now we start to look for this quote special again. Foreman is a pretty impressive back, and I think it depends on which team you talk to. I think the majority of the board still have McCaffrey ahead of Foreman, but I know a few teams that have Foreman ahead of him. So to me, 14 is just way too high to be talking about Christian McCaffrey.
I want to wrap up with this, guys. It's actually not NFL draft related, but it's the biggest news in the NFL last week, and that's Tony Romo. And I think, Hub, you're the perfect person to talk to about this because of your experience in the broadcast booth. Of course, Hub is the sideline reporter for Westwood One for nationally radio broadcasted games during the season. Spent plenty of time in the Chicago Bears radio booth. So you know what goes into preparing and the broadcast. Tony Romo will be on the number one CBS team with Jim Nance next season, replacing Phil Simms. What do you think about Tony Romo? And you've also covered Tony Romo for a long time. What do you think about this move by CBS and the move by Romo?
I think it makes perfect sense. I think he's going to be a natural. I think people are trying to outsmart themselves when they talk about experience. Now, a lot of my peers in the industry are about to get pissed at me, but I got to tell you guys, it ain't rocket surgery, okay? The guy is a natural. My first ever broadcast was my first time behind a radio microphone. It was just an accident. I was an ink-stained wretch who ended up in either the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time, depending on what you think of my work. But guys who spend a lot of time on TV or radio broadcasting, there's an instinct. It's something that comes to you naturally. It's not really something you learn. And so Tony Romo strikes me as that kind of guy. He's very bright. He's very conversational. Lord knows he knows the game. And so I think this experience thing, and again, forgive me, all you guys who work with me on broadcast, but it's a little overrated. The bigger question is, do you have the instincts? Do you have the natural gifts? I've kidded with Arthur about this many, many times. I think we are all, you get my theory on life. You don't want this, but you're going to get it. I think we are all born with one or two gifts from God. It's something we come into the world with, and for some of us, it's something you can leverage. Mine was, I was born with the ability to BS, and Tony Romo strikes me as one of those guys, to tell you the truth. And I think he's going to be great. And I think it's a bold move by CBS. I don't want to pile on Phil Simms because he's a class guy, and he had some decent years in the booth earlier in his career. But I'm just being honest. I never do this. I don't comment on other broadcasters. I open them up to them to take shots at me. I think Phil Simms has become pretty hard to listen to the last 4, 5, 6 years. CBS knew they had to make a move, and I can't think of anybody else out there. I read one column, I think it was by Richard Dietz. Dan Fouts is actually a friend who I've worked with, and I think he's outstanding. And I would have had no problem if they had elevated him to the number one spot. But they obviously weren't going to do that because they had Simms and him 1-2 for how long has it been now? And so for the bolder move that they were looking for, Arthur, I think Romo is the right move. I'm just surprised that his competitive nature allowed him to walk away because contrary to what people think, you make this move, he's not coming back to play. Well, there's got to be something in his contract. CBS is making a pretty big commitment for him here. So I do think it's permanent. I do think that he's going to do great. I'm just surprised he was willing to walk away when he did.
Yeah, it's contrary to what I think. I hope it doesn't happen because it was horrible to see what happened to Teddy Bridgewater on August 31st last year. But a quarterback is going to get hurt, or a team is going to realize sooner than later that they don't have a shot with the guys they have. And I think that's when Tony Romo's phone starts ringing. And I think that's when that competitive nature you just refers to kind of rises to the top. And I don't think we've seen the last of Romo on the field just my personal hunch. But from the CBS standpoint, I like it as well. I mean, it's a swing for the fences, and you just hit on it. Romo's got so much charisma. He's clearly a smart guy, and I think he's probably got a bright future in the broadcast booth eventually. But it's just I can't wrap my head around the idea of Romo not playing football in 2017. I think he's still going to at some point. It may be later in the season. It may be for a playoff push. But that's my guess is we're still going to see him again.
Well, just a real quick thought, Kev, before you take it back. Who here would have bet that John Gruden wasn't going to coach again? And are we starting to believe that he's not going to? And this is something I do know a little bit about. I can tell you, if Romo does want to come back, that contract's going to be kind of punitive because he's getting some serious cake to do this. And CBS doesn't want to have to switch their number one color commentator in season. So, you may be right, Arthur, that he can't resist and he comes back next year or even the year after. But to make the change in season, unless he pulls the plug before the season opener, I'm hard pressed to see that happening.
Yeah, and I don't know how many teams would be able to outbid CBS for Tony Romo. I mean, if we're talking $4 or $5 million for Tony Romo to broadcast 16 games, I mean, what team is going to give him more money than that to get punished behind an offensive line that is not the Dallas Cowboys offensive line and being a completely new offense? But, I mean, Arthur, I know that the competitive nature is something that it's hard. We saw it with Favre. We've seen it with other players. But that's a lot of money he is taking for a very nice job that does not let any harm come to his way.
It's a great point, and there's two ways to look at it. One is that he's a former undrafted free agent from Eastern Illinois who never thought he was going to have an NFL career, and he's already set up his kids and his grandchildren and his grandchildren's grandchildren. That's the one side, and then so that he's not worried about the money. But I guess the other side is he still has his relative health after a couple back or neck surgeries, and that's the part that you mentioned John Gruden, Hub. He didn't even have to factor in the health side of it, so that is very real. I hope he doesn't play because he still is in one piece, and I think this may be the best thing, but I don't know. I just think that allure of a Super Bowl, he talked about it this week, leaving without one. I think ultimately that's what weighs into this decision more than anything.
And just so I'm clear, because I'm both completely agreeing and disagreeing with Arthur at the same time, I was stunned when it was announced because of that competitive nature. I didn't see this happening. But, guys, he's had some time to think about it. I mean, this is not a decision he came to overnight. I mean, I can tell you one source who I trust implicitly, he's been talking to CBS since the middle of last season. And so this was not a sudden epiphany, gee, I'm going to give this a shot. And so it's hard to wrap your arms around. I really thought, I mean, he would have a legitimate chance to win a Super Bowl in Houston this year. It just made too much sense. And so that's the part that surprises me. So now, Arthur, when we talk about some other team's going to get an injury and come calling, well, maybe they will, but could it possibly be as good a situation as Houston? So that's where I'm kind of saying, maybe a year away and he'll get the juices going, but I'd be shocked if it was this season.
I think we could all agree Tony Romo might retire as the most famous quarterback to never even make a conference title game. So good on you, Tony Romo. Thank you to everyone for watching this Facebook Live. Be sure to, of course, follow us on Facebook. Follow all of our work on Twitter at PF Weekly. And go to ProFootballWeekly.com and get your Pro Football Weekly Draft magazine, as well as our update with some updated scouting reports from Greg Gabriel. And stay there for our mock drafts and all of our analysis up until and through. Oh, there's the draft magazine and the update up until and through the draft 15 days away. So again, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned to Pro Football Weekly. Yeah,
so just before we go, guys, if I'm still on, I know Arthur's advertising for us. If somebody out there can either tweet at me or email me a way to get a decent ringtone on my cell phone, I'll never figure it out myself. So somebody please let me know. Get some Beatles or the Michigan Fight Song or something. I'd really appreciate it.
All right, you heard it out there. And maybe I'll even throw in a free magazine for you.
I will. Yeah, you get me the Michigan Fight Song as my ringtone, I'll give you 2 free magazines.
All right, thanks everybody for watching.